In this video, we're going to talk about how we can use NMAP to find vulnerabilities on our environment. NMAP is a little bit of a black magic item if you're not super familiar with it, and can be very questionable as far as the output that comes with it, but it turns out that it gives us quite a bit of good information. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our environment and see what that actually looks like and how we can use it to identify vulnerabilities that we can then, as a security engineer, resolve or patch, or as a hacker would be able to exploit. So here's our network diagram. Again, as an example of the security hacker, we are out here on the external network, on the untrusted network of the environment. And up here is a web server. This has web services running on it. The way that this is configured is that the firewall is configured to publish port 80 off of the web server. So if I am the attacker, what I would do is I would scan this IP address right here in order to see what services are available. So let's go ahead and try that. Let's jump onto our backtrack machine and start the scanning. Now, normally I would do this with an NMAP command. However, for visibility purposes for this video, I'm using the program called ZenMap. ZenMap is a GUI based version of NMAP. I'm going to go ahead and type in the IP address here. You can see the profile selected is intent scan, and then right here is the specific command that we would run if I was to do this through NMAP. I'm going to go ahead and click scan. By the way, this intent scan is very chatty, very public to the viewer. So this, if you were actually to do this in real life, if you're a penetration tester and you're going to a company and you're testing their penetration, testing if you can penetrate them, you probably wouldn't want this intense scan because it's very chatty. It would show them exactly what you're doing. You would probably choose a less intense scan, so like a quick scan or a regular scan, or you could even come in here with a manually change it from a T-4 to a T-1, which still gives you all the options. It just runs much slower and less obvious. All right, so I'm doing this via ZenMap, like I said, because it's a little bit more visual. We've got some color coding in here that helps us out. It bolds the numbers for us. It just makes it a little bit more readable when you're not exactly sure what you're looking at. Very quickly on the left-hand side, we can see our hosts. If I click on that host, then it jumps right to it. If I had scanned multiple hosts, then this would obviously be showing me multiple hosts on the left-hand side. Clicking on it then takes me to the details for the host. We can look at specific ports and we can see, hey, it's telling me I've got Microsoft FTP service here, XP Telnet D, ESMTP, IIS, and so on. And this is actually where our scanning starts coming in, where our NMAP benefits start helping us out. For instance, we can see here that I'm running Microsoft ESMTP 6.0. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Google and I'm going to type in ESMTP 6.0.3790.0 with the keyword vulnerability or exploit, I guess, would also work. I guess it helps if you spell vulnerability correctly. So there, just off the first glance, it tells us we're on port 25. We're running a specific version of ESMT, a specific version of Microsoft's Exchange server, and I can see there are some vulnerabilities. See, this line right here says that specific version is not included, so this first one may or may not have something of interest to me. I'm gonna skip past that just yet. So I'm actually gonna say must include. So here we go, Microsoft Exchange SMTP DNS lookup overflow. If I open that up in another tab here, it should take me to a vulners.com. Takes on a lot. So it takes me to a website where it talks about, hey, there's a DNS lookup overflow. Looks like this is actually a vulnerability. This is kind of cool. This is the first time I've actually looked at this, so I'm kind of new to it. Looks like some sort of a C programming language based vulnerability, specifically designed for that one version of email. Let's see. Additionally, there's an MS10024 that doesn't seem to have the specific version. Oh, that's where I was just at. Same thing. So anyways, so I can keep looking through here, looking for a specific exchange or specific vulnerability for that exchange server. Maybe I've started looking through that and I'm not seeing anything specific to that. Let's actually try the XP Telnet D. So again, just look in. I'm going to actually quote this so that it comes out exactly the way that it's shown there. Microsoft Windows XP Telnet D exploit. Looks like it's trying to fill it out for me automatically here. This then says, hey, there's an exploit here. Possible exploit. And then we just look through each of these. So here's an example of the XP Telnet D, the output from the Telnet or from the NMAP, and then how he's actually attacking it. Not sure if he's attacking Telnet in this example. So let's try it again. Are there any exploits? Don't see any exploits. That page right there looks like an exploit. Yeah, so not necessarily anything specific there. So let's see what else we might have. So we can look, as you saw, I can look through each of these services and just Google them. It's very helpful when I have specific version numbers like 6.03790. It tells me specifically what version of application to look for. Along with this, I also get the host details. That is, if you're familiar with NMAP, that's the -A portion up here. It tells me what operating system I'm running. SP2, and then it tells me how likely is this to be correct. 93% accurate. So that in itself can be helpful because now I can go back to Google and search Windows Server, say Server 2003 SP2 exploit, and now I can see, ooh, there's a whole exploit database just for Microsoft Windows. 2003. I think this one right here, the 2003 server vulnerabilities. This is from CVE Details. I've never been to this webpage before, so I'll assume that it's pretty good. We can see right here, very first one that they have listed, a score of 10. I'm assuming that means that it has the most vulnerable and most successful exploit. So that means that I might be able to exploit terminal services to send RDP requests. Or I can do another exploit down here, which uses the Windows OLE or RPC. It's just got tons of exploits for me right here. Piece of cake for me to be able to find. All right, and then let's see, more detail here. We can get into the actual NMAP output. And again, if I was actually running this myself, I would actually run this from NMAP on a command line. But the colors and everything here make it a little bit easier to run, or a little bit easier to demonstrate. So we can see, yep, it does an ARP scan and then a SYN scan. It starts finding all the open ports. It says, hey, I found 5 services. That's awesome. It's starting right here an OS detection, which we'll see further down where it actually shows what the OS detection turned. Because of the switches, we said go ahead and try to log in, and it logged into the FTP service as anonymous. Anonymous login is allowed, and it found that there were a whole bunch of PDF files in there. Oh, Well, that could be very interesting if I'm an attacker. That means that you have an anonymous FTP. I can log in and here's a bunch of stuff that I can get access to. That may be by design, it may not be by design. It's always good to review that to make sure it's working properly. Telnet D, ESMTP, a little bit more detail about ESMTP. For instance, it supports turn, size, eTurn, pipelining, DSN. It supports all of these options. These are all the commands I can use via SMTP. So if I'm entirely unsure, I could continue to Google these to see, oh, what can I actually do with these various commands? You know, these various features that this server supports. We then get into Microsoft IIS HTTP 6.0. Again, that's a little bit more specific as far as the ports for IIS 6.0. Okay. And I could Google that, and there's probably not a whole lot of vulnerabilities for IIS 6.0. It does, however, give me the specific HTTP methods that it supports. So maybe IIS in and of itself is not supported, does not have a lot of vulnerabilities that I can exploit, but one of those methods does. Again, Google it. Or right here, potentially risky methods. Here's some methods that you might intentionally want to start looking at. A little bit more information, http robots.txt. So there is a file on most web servers called a robots.txt, and the idea of the robots.txt is when a web crawler such as Google or Bing is going out and indexing the entire internet, it looks for this robots.txt file, and that robots.txt file says, don't look over here. Maybe there's some information that you don't want to show up on a search engine. So you would put a robots.txt file on your server and you say, don't look in these directories. Now, as a hacker, that kind of suggests to me that there might be something I want to look at there. Let's see specifically. So it's got an admin page. That could mean most anything, but it does have a WebDAV page. So what we could do, if we go back to our search engine here, let's see, we know that this is IIS 6, so IIS 6.0, and WebDAV. WebDAV exploit. Autofills for me, that's really nice. And, ooh, SC storage path from URL. Let's see what else we got. We've got some CVEs here. We've got actual exploit code. It's the code execution, and so we can start looking at these guys now. Let's see, WebDAV SC storage from URL remote buffer overflow. I scroll down here, I see some sample code. Let's see, this function in the WebDAV service for IIS 6.0, specifically on Windows Server 2003 R2, which is what we're running, allows remote attackers to execute arbitrary code, which means any code that we want to run. A little bigger, not making it any bigger. So arbitrary code, any code that we as an attacker want to run, we can run via this vulnerability. This is an exploit DB, so this is an example of what the code of what the exploit would look like, and we can see down here. Here's looks like it's Python code. We are connecting to a socket on port 80, specific IP address. In this example, it's localhost, but it could be anything. It then prepares a payload in order to attack the machine. Then includes some shell code, which in this case I believe is calling calculator. Joins it all together and then sends it across the socket. It exploits the remote buffer overflow, allowing us to execute whatever code we want in this environment. That may be what we're looking for. Let's see what else we got. IIS WebDAV remote code execution. This may be the same thing, and I believe it is. SC storage path from URL function. Yeah, that looks like the same thing. SC storage path from URL. Does this have better? PL, so it looks like this is a Perl script. And here's another example of the same exploit. More sample code on how to actually run it yourself. Again, IIS6 looks like the same. Prop find looks like the same error message right there. All right, so we found what looks like a fully viable vulnerability in our environment. That was just with IIS. Let's see, what else we got? We got pop 3D, and we can specify. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot of information here. See, just pop capabilities, user expire never. That might actually be something of looking into. User expire never. It's pop 3D, and then user expire. And we can see, oh, hey, there's some capabilities, errors. It looks like that's an output from NMAP. Again, another output from NMAP. I'm not really seeing a whole bunch of exploits or vulnerability. The box doesn't quite look like it's English. So we can keep looking through there as well. All right, so let's see. At that point, we then get into the MAC address of the machine. We see it is a VMware machine. Device type, it now is guessing at what the operating system is, and pretty much comes up with a Windows machine of some sort. So there we have it. That is how we can start using NMAP in order to find possible vulnerabilities in an environment. If you are a penetration tester, you've probably gone through this quite a few times, and what you do is you create a list somewhere of common exploits that you see. Things that you will look through the environment to be able to say, hey, that right there might be something to look at specifically. Let's see. So we found out, for instance, the fact that the FTP server is open. So maybe in our checklist, we would include look for the FTP server as far as being anonymous, and look at the files being shared to make sure that those are all appropriate public shared files. Here under the HTTPD, it specifies, hey, there's potentially risky methods here. So maybe you have a checklist of, yes, this one is risky. You know, the trace command or trace method, for instance, may potentially be risky in these certain situations. So you would have a checklist saying, if the trace command is enabled, look for these other options that might be important to know about. Same thing with POP. Specifically, in this case, I believe the WebDAV right there, we highlighted that as being a possible issue. We actually found vulnerabilities after just a little bit of searching. We found live vulnerabilities, so maybe that's something else we need to look into our environment to secure our systems. So as a security engineer, it's a great thing to be able to do, to be able to look through each of these. And I would say if you are responsible for this environment, you should know every single port that's on here. You should be able to look through here and specify, yes, port 80 should be open. Yes, 25 and 110, and all these ports should definitely be open. Beyond that, look through here. Yes, these files should all be publicly accessible. Beyond that, yes, all of these commands should be available to the end users. All of these HTTP methods should be available, even the ones that are potentially risky. You should know, you should be able to prove that you've gone through this list one line at a time and confirmed everything is either available or should be available to the public, or there is a plan to resolve them quickly. So there you go. That is a quick run through of how to use NMAP in order to find vulnerabilities in your server environment. It could become fairly difficult if you have a large environment to go through all of this on a routine basis. However, I hope that this video has started walking you through the process and the steps necessary in order to have a good and secure environment.